Давайте начнем. Мы расскажем про технологию Identity Firewall.
And Kirill Ilyin.
Но
So we will talk about identity firewall, a 15-year-old technology, but people still talk about it.
да, жух. Со мной выступает Кирилл Ильин,
So I'm Artyom Kirillin,
руководителем кибербезопасности
and
компании
my co-speaker is Kirill Ilyin, who works at Italma,
автопромышленности.
which makes a lot of hardware for car industry.
Эту идею выступить с ID-фаерволом Артем Кириллин, да, заместитель
Artyom
департамента
actually gave me this idea. Artyom is a deputy director for monitoring, response, and research at Bizone.
Итак, давайте начнем с
He
определения.
gave me the underlying idea. So, what identity firewall is?
Технология, позволяющая управлять
It's a technology that controls network access using the credentials of identified users on computers or servers.
управление этой технологией используется
For convenience,
IDFW группы либо organization unit.
IDFW groups or an organization unit in a domain are used.
Этой технологии заключается в том, что
The key feature of this technology
NGFW, без него никак. Но он должен
is that you need NGFW
технологию взаимодействия с доменом, мелдапом и обмена
because it needs to
учетными записями,
support IP address exchange, account exchange, and group exchange.
политик доступа,
For dynamic access policies,
необходимо управлять ролями. То есть
you need to know how to control your roles. This is a very basic story.
и у вас нету
If you introduce IDFW and you don't have any access management, why do you do it in the first place?
стиля только для разграничения пользовательского и сервера.
Or you may introduce it to actually create a wall between the users and the servers. But that's not very effective, actually.
Управление доступами, ролевыми моделями.
So for IDFW to work, you need already some access control.
Использовать Identity Firewall.
And if your network is zero trust,
говорит Артем,
IDFW may really work.
ну, допустим,
Well, normally how it works.
у нас изначально
Let's take our case.
NGFW использовалась только для авторизации сквозной.
In the beginning, we only use IDFW only for the authorization without any management of policies, rules and roles, and so on.
Обобщенную схему сети
now
любой
it's different.
организации.
So this is a generic network scheme of any organization, right?
Это сеть организации, которая подключена к внешнему сервису SOC.
So it's connected to an external SOC service.
Имеет
It has EDR agents, it has event sources,
определенными стрелочками
and green arrows
отображены все взаимодействия, которые контролируются.
show all the
То есть
communication controlled by IDFW.
мы будем далее говорить.
And we will talk about how to control these green arrows.
Схема взаимодействия в сети через
This is how
без использования IDFW. Для начала
it works without
IP-адрес там как бы конкретного хоста.
NGFW. The IP address of a specific host goes to a specific resource, to a specific port. NGFW just runs it through a list, whether it can go or cannot.
Внедрение IDFW,
So,
внедрение
a couple of barriers.
IDFW на базе
This is how you introduce a static IDFW on an organizational unit in a domain.
сверяется не IP-адрес машины,
Here, you don't look at the IP address of a machine, but you look at the name of the machine, whether the name belongs to the domain,
машина нет.
and you check actually whether this machine exists now or not, and so on.
В схеме, про которую, собственно, мы
But this is static.
и на которую мы надеемся и внедряем,
Dynamic,
уже
this is something we're doing now,
условное, как бы такое
has a domain agent. A domain agent
маппинга IP-адрес
is an entity that holds the mapping table, IP addresses, names, and so on. There is a small trap whether there is an IDFW static working at the same time. So it also generates a query, but it transfers the credentials of a user who requests certain network access. NGFW goes to the domain agent, asks who is it, and gets a response. This is the user, belongs to this group, and this is their IP address. NGFW checks it, whether the access lists have those groups. If yes, it goes through. If no, it's rejected. This domain agent regularly addresses the domain controller once every 5 minutes or every minute and gets those mapping updates.
Дальше поехали, раскроем уже.
So this is how access is being provided. Now, let's look at what do you need in order to deploy this. NGFW, this is a must. You also need to set up a specialized account in the domain to get this mapping table from NGFW. Network zoning rules. There are two different segments, and you can walk from the user segment to the server segment, but they're different. And there is also an NGFW or any gateway between the server segment and any external segment. Again, if it's dynamic, you have the domain agent. How to use it? Kirill will tell you how it works within an infrastructure, and then I will talk about the SOC situation. I will ask a question to the room, and if someone guesses which NGFW is being used in this scheme, I will give you a big fatty like. On our infrastructure, we have a pre-logon workstation in which the first factor is the account login and password. Then there is a request to Radius, which is the borderline resource. He maps which host has come, with which IP, with which certificate, and so on. So the request goes to the domain says either OK or not, password pass, and then we ask NGFW, challenge request, and so on. And in the next stage, we identify the role of the person who are getting access. An employee connects to a VPN from a host. So IDFW asks the domain, tell me, which group does this user belong to? Which rules do I need to apply to them? For example, if the user is in the user segment, for example, an accountant,
к примеру. Соответственно, для него доступ по SSH вообще, в принципе, на любом в сети будет запрещен. Вот, соответственно,
they would not get access to the network.
Динамических историй.
And this is the profit of using the dynamic story. I will talk about static first, and then I will add the role dependencies to tell you about the static role. In the dynamic, we check the content. Who came to us from which host, whether this machine has a certificate, whether it is protected, whether this host is a domain host or a corporate one, and whether it passes through all those checks. As a result, we give the overall response, whether this user can get access to the corporate network or not.
This
approach actually does not allow employees to change corporate networks. But what if this is a BYOD company and people work from home?
Реальный кейс.
And this is a very real case.
Корпоративному VPN
An employee
устройство бьет,
goes
дальше NGFW и плюс
through the corporate firewall with the BYOD, and
в целом,
the IDFW
в случае он идет
looks at the rules
откуда он
whether this device can get access to critical resources.
хоста на конечный ресурс,
So it goes to NGFW, and it is allocated resources, and it is isolated into a specific group, which is isolated from the rest of the segment, but it has access to the corporate messenger, for example, to write a report to support if something happens.
Артем,
Now, we promised to tell you how we use it, and Artyom will be your man there.
Использовать не просто для управления доступом,
IDFW can be used not only to control access, but to respond to incidents.
нужно понять, что мы локализуем, как мы
In
локализуем.
order to do that, you need to understand what we localize and how we localize it. If we localize the workstation host,
У вас в офисе находящийся, то создаем одни группы и как бы определяем набор ресурсов, которые должны работать даже
there is one thing that we know about the groups and about the resources. For example, the resources need to be there for forensics, for this to be forensic auditable, and so on.
DNS, домен,
Here,
базовые сервисы и
you need DNS, basic domain services, and EDR with an antivirus.
таким образом создать соответствующие аушки для машин
You
и
also
группы для пользователей.
create AUs for machines and IDFW groups for users
Таким образом,
for SOC localization.
при-
You give them the names, and you limit their change privileges.
рабочие станции
So IT specialists who manage workstations should not have the privileges to change the groups and AUs.
правила доступа на NGFW, то есть добавить access list
Then you limit access to NGFW
создана,
through access list.
применена, и вот
So the access list is created, the configuration is
на NGFW заходить
applied, and
нужно просто поменять.
in case of responding, you don't need even to access the NGFW. You just change the composition of the groups.
Компрометацию учетной записи.
So this is a case with a
Необходимо делать. Ну,
compromise of an account. So the classic response is you block
на том или ином
the account.
и блокировка
However,
записи не разорвет сессию, пока не
malware
хост
will still be active on a host, and the blocking will not break the session until the domain is rebooted or the host is rebooted.
конкретного хоста, который мы знаем,
And to localize a specific host that we know already is doing this through the antivirus or through the ADR, there are a lot of ways to localize this.
то есть и последний, как бы, это уже перемещение учетной записи пользователя в IDFW группу для локализации. Это делается двумя
This is in fact
специалистов, выделенных узкого там круга лиц.
done through changing the groups for localization. So our IDR can do that, or the local IT specialist can do that if they are prepared to do so. So we have prepared the analytics and compared these two approaches.
Так как надо, службы разные, это мы уже более зрелые компании.
Doing this manually, it is very time intensive because the services are very different.
Оформил, заявку взяли в работу, выполнили,
So
отчитали, что
in our company, it's already quite time intensive to create the query, execute the query, and only then run the script.
на time to response.
So 70 to 150 minutes time to response is quite optimistic.
И мерение минут, респонс и
Through automation, you can put down the response time with a compromised account to 15 minutes.
выглядит на схеме на нашей
Let's see the schematic.
сети. Заблокировать атаку везде и сразу, собственно, заблокировать все взаимодействия,
So,
где бы не было авторизовано.
It is impossible to block all the connections
Наполнил группу
without this IFFW.
И
So you have put all the compromised users to a single group,
перезалил станцию.
and you have worked with all the hosts, and you have then ungrouped the compromised users, and you have just renewed the image of the station.
Начинается работа там,
So you have isolated the host, and of course, forensics will need to work with that host for a while.
уровнях. То есть вы сам...
So you can block the communication at 3 layers.
Потому что учетная запись бывает техническая учетная запись.
You have blocked the
Обсуждали.
account, but the account may be of technical nature.
GitLab начинает подлабывать всю остальную инфраструктуру, когда особенно у вас
There are cases through
секреты и прочие штуки. Вот здесь очень хорошо.
people trying to siphon off your secrets through GitLab.
Вот. И третий уровень вы можете блокировать уже.
So you can block an account at the network level, and you can block this through EDR, block the host on a specific, the account on specific hosts.
Вы можете на
This lets you respond faster,
соответственно, действия по локализации инцидента,
and you can start localizing the incident
на респонс
and free up more time
того, что происходит.
to analyze what's really happening.
Артем?
Теперь покажу, как это выглядит для аналитика. То есть
Now I'll show you how it looks like for an analyst.
ищет по условному обозначению
You go to the EDR server,
специальные
you look for IDFW groups and specific tasks to execute policies.
пользователь
Privileged or unprivileged users,
назначает на хост
maybe in the groups. You choose the task,
скомпрометированного пользователя,
you put in the compromised account, and you press, and magic happens. Yes.
но на самом деле не все так просто, как бы
Of course, it's far from magic.
есть часть там
It's complicated.
либо ошибок, которые
Есть
могут
швабры,
да,
There are
которых можно очень больно наступить.
really a lot of rakes
вас
hiding
применение этой
hiding in the grass.
технологии.
So there are certain things you shouldn't do.
Ручной ввод учетных записей
First of all,
и добавление. То есть
Don't type in accounts manually when you add them. Do it through scripts.
из SOAR и
Get the variable from SOAR and introduce it into EDR.
эти человеческие факторы.
Whatever. Try to escape the human factor.
Пользователей из IDFW группы я выше говорил, что нужно ограничить, собственно,
Removing a user from an IDFW group
как бы
because admins
злоумышленникам,
have unlimited rights.
неосведомленным пользователям со стороны IT. Ну, собственно, блокировка сетевых доступов на серверах.
Blocking network access on servers. If you're doing this for the first time,
Ну, все,
and
протестирую,
if you think, okay, we've tested it and it works,
заблокирую.
here are our ITs, and I will
Встает.
block this, and the other. But if they are authorized in Active Directory, the Active Directory would actually be blocked.
Только на NGFW. То есть
And only NGFW can reverse this. So don't shoot yourself in the foot.
не реализация
And if hardening is not realized
технологии используются
on AD,
но не в суде, а в инфраструктуре.
so this technology is being used against you.
Здесь последствия тоже могут быть печальны. Вам и права подрежут на изменение этих групп.
Your rights to change those groups may be limited, and all your network access may also suffer. So you need to be very, very careful, and digital hygiene is a must.
Делает эту меру бесполезной.
And of course, all this is useless if you don't have basic network zoning.
Зачем?
Because if you don't have network zones, the traffic will just circumvent your IDFW groups.
При внедрении этой
And last but not least,
предыдущей
and that was one of my lessons learned,
банально наличие
is very trivial.
записей авторизованных на хосте. К примеру,
There are two authorized
которая зашла
accounts for a host.
работает там.
For example, a tech support remotely is helping a user doing something.
Набор другой. И, соответственно, как бы
IDFW groups
хоста режется доступы
have different sets,
работы у
and so the
пользователя.
host actually cuts the access for both.
Придумывать исключения для тех пользователей.
So you need to think of specific exceptions
Статические доступы.
for specific users and make static
Ну и, собственно, делать
IDFW groups for them
группы, в
and
которых
create priorities.
будут менее приоритетно пользовательские.
So user groups will take priority over tech support, for example.
Про проблемы основной, вот ты очень правильно сказал, что вас могут выкинуть из инфры. Вот это самое
So
большое.
the biggest problem is that if you don't harden, you may be knocked out of your own infrastructure.
Пробив и AD-шки, соответственно, у вас
So if the malware
все группы выкинет,
just breaks into your AD,
соответственно,
they will be capable of putting you in a group,
полностью заблокирован для всей компании.
or they can create a group of one, particularly you, and you will be thrown out of your own infrastructure. This is one of the complicated cases that you have to be ready for.
Если у вас нет сетевого зонирования, это вообще
And if you have network zoning, I would agree, it doesn't make any sense to do it.
вот. Давай, наверное, к плюсам перейдем.
Да.
Yes, and we will talk about the advantages of the system because
Мы топим за динамическую схему IDFW.
we actually prefer a dynamic
Большого количества
IDFW.
надо
It is more complex to execute, and it has
по каким
it needs more resources. You need network zoning. You need to understand which servers with which nuances on which protocols they work, who is the initiator of connection, host a server, and so on. You have to really understand and set up the system in a very careful manner. But
потому что у вас
I think it's worth it
безопасность сети
because
ставит на уровень, вы двигаетесь
you get to a next level of network security. This is a very big step forward toward zero trust,
оптимальная,
and
гибкость
it optimizes your remote support with maximum flexibility. New systems will change.
доступ
People may come and go.
просто
People may get remote access to the infrastructure, and so on. A growing company will need all that, and
минимальная
dynamic IDFW will do all this.
надежность
And another advantage is that NGFW
и
does not need to be changed more than once. For user access, you have set it up once, and you work at the level of domain.
автоматизировано вообще никуда.
With IAM, you can do it in an automated way. You don't have to penetrate the user interface at all.
Таких вот из одних неочевидных кейсов, которые действительно помогают в первую очередь не только ИБ, но и IT.
Non-trivial cases that
Для того, чтобы вы
help not just InfoSec but IT
вы начинаете
are as follows.
понять, а что у вас
In order to implement the dynamic scheme, you need to understand what's happening in your network. And then actually people may
вот, то
find out that it's a good idea to do network zoning, even micro zoning one-on-one, and so on. As a minimum, you start looking at your traffic on endpoint servers, and you connect specific certificates for it, improving the transparency of the traffic,
плюс это
the transparency of your infrastructure.
захардить АД.
And that's a step to harden your ID. And one of the key advantages
Это все очень просто.
from the point of view of the client path,
Существенно
it is very simple.
работу пользователям, потому что
It makes users' lives
достаточно быстро
much easier
есть единая точка,
because their queries are executed much faster,
получаете
and they have a single access point in which, magic happens.
корпоративного или с устройства бьет до, соответственно,
And
того, что происходит.
it works irrespectively of whether you are accessing from a corporate device or from your personal device. This is one of the big pluses that the company gets if you use this dynamic IDFW. Okay, thank you very much. Questions, please.
А можно, пока не ответили на вопрос, не задали вопросы,
While people are thinking about this, can you answer my question?
не про нас.
What was the question?
Что за NGFW?
It was NGFW. What is it?
Поднимайте руки, говорите. Ну,
Холодно.
No, it isn't.
Фортика нет функции прилогона. Тут прям явный флаг.
Not Fortic. Fortic doesn't have a pre-logon function. I gave you the flag.
Но чуть
Yes, you're close. You're close.
endpoint ушел, дальше начинал концепцию NGFW.
If you departed from checkpoint, yes, exactly. So that was the right answer. The right answer was off the microphone. Okay. Who raised your hand to ask a question?
Раз.
Да.
Такой вопрос. А для внешних пользователей, если без использования VPN
For an external user, if they are accessing the system not through the VPN,
открыт вовне,
if you have a DMZ service, for example, it's open from the outside.
для внешних
So
пользователей
can you
домой с доменным ноутбуком,
block external users? For example, he's gone back home with a corporate notebook and he tries to access a non-critical part of the company infrastructure from their home without using the VPN.
На самом деле,
So can you use this to block them?
понятный, который используется в большинстве
There are some technologies, and a lot of Western vendors can do that. They use the critical portal. Fortica, Checkpoint has it, and McAfee, and all the other vendors.
Вам не нужно строить VPN-сессию.
You don't need to create a VPN session and so on. You have authorized on this portal, and you get a store of applications that are applicable to you according to your role. So you don't publish them.
может быть, это и работало бы со внешними пользователями, или это только для
But does it work only with external users also?
Да, и конкретно на
You can give an account to an external user, and on this portal you just give them the rights to this, and the other.
вот такой кейс. И он, собственно, подключается с рабочего хоста, для него доступно это веб-приложение. И
And this web application, for example, will be accessible to them, only this web application, without further access to the corporate network. But it will come with without credentials.
веб
Yes, this is why I'm asking, because he comes without credentials. He's an external user.
Нет, тут вопрос именно,
My question is,
можно ли было бы именно этот механизм использовать
can you use this mechanism
внешних пользователей?
for this selective blocking of external users?
Тут нужно уточнение. Для каких внешних пользователей?
We need a clarification. Which external users? Corporate or your contractors, for example?
Он спокойно определит то, что это
Corporate. Well, if it's corporate, this IDFW can identify the notebook, for example, whether it is a domain notebook or not.
Information profile,
So you look into the host information profile.
выдан удостоверяющим
So if the certificate is issued by your center, AD, it lets them through. If not, it creates a different client path. That's it.
именно на пользователей, но про группу
Secondly, you've talked about IUs and security groups. Security groups are managed in the same way. Yes, exactly.
Подскажите, пожалуйста,
We have time for another question.
активных пользователей, а вот
We've talked about corporate users, but what about, complete third persons?
В зависимости от того, какую модель и куда выпускаете.
Depending on what is your model.
Вам инфру, да, вы их даете
If those third persons admin your infra,
внешний третий
you create an account for them with a specific identifier external partner and so on and so forth.
доступом по SSH через PAM.
Okay.
Или с набором RSAT.
They can get access through SSH, through PAM, or through NSAT, through the administrative domain and so on. Or you can publish an application for them.
Приходит, соответственно, вы 1С-ку ему опубликовали,
1S, for example.
да, ограниченно.
You have not published it for everyone, but for this particular group. It works.
У тебя в инфраструктуре
And if your third person lives in your infrastructure, some outstaff,
ко всей остальной инфраструктуре,
you can limit their access to the rest of the infrastructure,
для того, чтобы наладить
but give them access to the internet.
интернет для пользователей.
Because this is a very good tool for internet access. For example, your accountant can go here, here, and there. The lawyer goes to garant.ru, consultant.ru, and nothing else.
Это
And if you want to limit their access to active resources, you create the rules in IDFWs, and it works very, very well.
с VDI говорили про сетевое зонирование и
In the slide with VZI, you have talked about network zoning.
знака.
But will this work without NAC?
Работать без знака.
Yes, it will, and NAC is not needed, but if you
Соответственно, признак
don't check the marker of what is installed on the end device, the policy check it's called.
который подключается,
So the connecting device,
оперативной сети,
the device connecting to the corporate network, has to go through a specific stack of security rules. Without NAC, this will not work.
сегмент. Если мы говорим про западный сегмент, то там есть
In the Russian segment. In the Western segment, for example, there is a function that builds in NAC
он
with host information profile check.
сам NGFW принимает решение на основе
So the host information profile is sent to NGFW, and NGFW makes a decision what kind of a device has connected.
внедрять NAC, конечно.
So it depends on the functionality actually, but you can configure it.
Вопрос коротенький.
Can I ask another short question? Unfortunately, no, because we are out of time. You can find us here and ask your question offline. Thank you. Thank you, Artyom and Kirill. You choose the best question and you give the book.
От молодого человека был прекрасный вопрос
I think
по поводу
this gentleman asked the great question on
как пускать пользователей.
how to provide access to very, very, very external users. Okay, thank you for the question. You get the book.